Okay, so next is polishing the stone, and for that we're going to use these cerium oxide spectra laps. They come from 3M, available at your lapidary supply. For that you need a master lap. This was an old 1200 lap, or you can use a master lap that's for sale. So these have no sticky on them, and the dull side is the side you're going to be polishing on. So to start with, you have to add water. That's what's going to hold this to the lap. And scrape it to get anything foreign off it. Put the lap, ultra lap on, or spectra lap. Put your nut on, and make sure it's flat. So now that I'm polishing, I can get rid of the visor because it's not enough power to really look at the polish. I shut the water way down just so it's dripping sporadically. Now this is not how 3M tells you to use these laps, but I found it to be effective when I add cerium oxide to the lap. It extends the life of the lap and increases how quickly it polishes, but you can't have much water going on it because it just washes it off. So I'm going to start back where we finished up with the main facets at the cullet, and we were at 43 degrees. Now the height of this lap compared to what I had on there before will be different, so we want to raise it and then lower it to the lap. So once you get close, you check the meter and try and get back close to zero. Zero may not be exactly where we need to be, but once you've touched it down, you take a look and try and see where it's polishing. Back at 43 degrees, and so far I can't see where it's polishing. Now this is a real critical point, trying to decide what's polished and what's not. It's very difficult to see, and it takes many novices some time to find the point between the light and your eye that you can actually see the surface. I do call this the twilight zone. It's that point between light and dark where you can see things that you normally wouldn't see. And if you turn it, you kind of see it's bright white, and then it goes dark, and then somewhere in between there is where you can actually see what's polished and what's not. Many cutters have a very difficult time telling that something is finely polished. What you're looking for are usually dots or scratch lines that run across the facet, and those are the things you've got to get rid of. So I can see that I'm cutting towards the girdle and to the left slightly. So two things I've got to do. I'm cutting towards the girdle, so I need to raise the mast so it will go down further and cut further towards the cullet. And because I'm cutting to the left side now, I've got to use the cheater. And this is the cheater, and I'm going to cheat towards the right. Just a little bit, doesn't take much. usually. And I've gone ever so slightly too far. I mean, it's very fine adjustments usually. And it's pretty much dead on now, but there's quite a few scratches. And you may find that you get scratches and you can't get rid of them. So sometimes it's a problem with the Ultra lap and you have to move to a different location on the lap. And they can get too dry. Scratches. Starting to go away. And if you avoid sweeping in broad sweeps and just pick a small area, at least if you're getting scratches, you know to move away from that area. Is getting better. And in quartz, sometimes you'll see what's called orange peel. It's hard to describe until you've seen it, but orange peel is little kind of waviness. And sometimes when you're cutting on this side of the lap, if you turn to this side of the lap carefully, it will tend to get rid of the orange peel. And sometimes scratches. Except I'm having a lot of problem with scratches, and not unusual with quartz. It's a difficult stone to polish. Problems, just move in on the lap or out until you find a place that's working correctly. Sometimes the polish comes quick, sometimes it takes some time. Okay, so I've got one more facet to polish, and once I found a good place on the lap that worked well, they all went very quickly. It is, again, a difficulty polishing quartz. Anybody that has suggestions of other things to try, I would like to review those in the future. This is the best polishing of quartz that I've found so far. So I'm going to continue, finish this last culet facet, or the main facet. So I've finished up the pavilion main facets, and we're going to show you a picture of how nice the polish is on those. And from there we're going to go to the P1 on this design, which is the pavilion brake facets, and finish up this pavilion. So now we're going to polish the girdle brake facets, and according to the design we have to go to 44.1. So this is on 40, it's currently on 3, we move to 4 and one more line on this machine. These numbers can vary on your machine, how many divisions you have, but this is now set for 44.1 as the design asks for. And so I have to do 93, 87, 81. So on my machine, it's all these red marks, which are 6 apart, 6 indices apart. So I'm set on 3 currently, and I should take this to 0. That's what we cut it to, somewhere close. So I've got a slow drip on the machine so it doesn't wash away all the material. Start it up, not running too fast. Don't want the cerium oxide to be thrown off. And we want this set to somewhere close to 0 and see where we're at. So currently I'm cutting towards the girdle of the stone. So what I need to do is raise the mass slightly. It doesn't take much. This will take me down more towards the culet, and it seems to be right where I need to be. So in case if it was polishing or if you are not getting a polish to the right side of the stone, you'll take the cheater and you'll move it right. This is the indicator, and you would move it towards the right. And if it's polishing, not polishing to the left side and you need to polish further left, you move the cheater to the left. All right, so I try to keep a good charge of cerium on the lap. These laps can last you anywhere from 1 stone to 5 stones. They do wear out fairly quickly. It's one of the problems with the Spectra laps. So now I've finished the first facet. I'm going to move on to the next one, which on this machine, it's this next red line. It's 6 indices away. Other machines are set up with different markers, but you'll get used to where to set it. In this case, it's moved to number 9. And when you're going, if you get used to going one direction all the time, either clockwise or counterclockwise, it'll be easier for you to keep track of things. So on the second facet, as meet point faceting states, you're trying to make 2 points meet. So in this case, we're not only trying to get a good polish, but you're trying to get the points of the 2 facets you polished up towards the culet. You're trying to get those to match accurately. And you also want them to match between the 2 facets at the girdle. You've got a line on the girdle, and you want these to all match up at that point. So one thing I do when I'm polishing is I tend to count. I kind of get used to trying to predict how long it's going to take to do a facet, and I'll count, and then the next facet I kind of know how long it's going to take, and if I count to 50 and hopefully the facet's polished, then I can go to the next facet and do the same. Sometimes it works, but it's always an aid in keeping you on the lap longer so you're not looking at the stone too much. So sometimes when you're polishing a facet, you have lots of problems with it, and you have to polish it so much that its length grows more than the others. So now you have to decide, do I go back and redo all the facets, or can I accept a not perfect meet of facets? Kind of depends how far you overcut. And generally I'm willing to accept facet meets that aren't quite perfect. I'm more concerned with the quality of the polish. So we're all finished polishing the pavilion of this stone now. You want to come in and take a closer look at it. Now I haven't polished the girdle of the stone. You can decide whether you want to do that or not. I don't believe it affects the brilliance of the stone, and because I've had a lot of issues where I just go and finally get the stone done and start polishing the girdle, and I've had more than one valuable stone actually have issues with that polishing and break a chip out of it, and then you're kind of starting over again. So I choose not to polish girdles. So now that we've finished cutting the pavilion of the gem, we're going to transfer it so we can cut the crown. First thing I do is make sure everything is clean. This is 91% alcohol. Just make sure the grease is off the stone. And then I usually scrape the dops just to get all the old wax off. Give a nice clean surface to attach to. And the size dop you use, you actually have two you can use for this round stone. Either a cone dop or a V dop. And the difference is the cone dop is going to take you a long time to soak the glue off it, because after we're done we will soak the glue rather than heating it loose, just for safety purposes. And a cone dop is going to take several days to come off, whereas the V dop will be off overnight. So I generally choose the V dop, but in this case I don't have a real good size for this stone, so I'm going to use the cone dop. So you put the dop in one side of the transfer block and the other stone in the stone inside the other. Mix equal proportions of the glue. So we've got our glue mixed up, and the first thing I'll do is kind of rub it on the surface of the stone just to make sure it gets a good contact. And then partially fill the cone dop. Put them together, and again, you don't want anything hanging over the edge of the stone. So one way to do that is just to put it vertical, and it'll drip down the dop and try and help it out just so we don't have glue in the way when we're cutting. So we're going to let this set for probably at least 3 hours, preferably longer, and then we'll show you how to remove the original dop. So now it's time to remove the dop in preparation for cutting the crown of the stone. Make sure I'm going to release the right side. Because we've used epoxy on the stone, I am going to use heat to remove it, but I'm not going to heat the dop because that transfers so much heat to the stone that it can cause fractures in the stone. So we heat up an X-Acto blade. You don't have to get it red hot. Don't want to transfer too much heat. And then we start cutting the wax away from the dop. I press down on the stone. Occasionally I get little chips in the top like I just did there, but usually it doesn't go far enough to cause any problems. Heat it one more time and go around the stone, not staying in one place too long, and hopefully that's enough to break it free, which it's not broken free yet. Try that one more time. Occasionally you do have to heat up the dop stick, but once you remove most of this, because I have no epoxy between the stone itself and the dop, it's only around the edge, this will usually break free. This one's going to be stubborn. We'll give this one more shot with the blade, and if that doesn't work, we're going to have to heat the dop. I do try to avoid this because I once lost 100 karat tanzanite heating a dop up. So this epoxy method usually works, but sometimes there's a gap and the epoxy seeps underneath between the dop. So you do have to heat it. And maybe 1 in 10 stones I have to do this, but it doesn't take much heat because there's not much epoxy holding the stone. Just put a little, hold the stone tightly and put a little pressure on the dop and it'll pop right off. If you put too much pressure on this side of the dop and don't hold the stone while you're doing it, you may break this side free. And when you're holding the stone, you can feel just how hot it's getting. If it's getting too hot, you can quit heating it. So that's how we remove it, and now we're on to cutting the crown. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. And I'm Steve Moriarty from Moriarty's Gem Art.